You are listening to this right now using, well, probably less than 1% of your actual biological hardware.
Which is a wild thing to consider.
Right. Because the consciousness you are experiencing as you drive your car or, wash your dishes or stare at your screen, the awareness you assume is the absolute peak of your human capability is essentially just a screensaver.
A biological screensaver.
Exactly. Because your real power, which is an energetic payload equivalent to roughly 1 billion volts, is entirely dormant. It's asleep at the very base of your spine, just waiting for a biological ignition sequence that honestly most people will never even initiate.
It completely dismantles our conventional understanding of human anatomy, doesn't it? Because we are so accustomed to the standard medical model.
Right, the x-rays, the MRIs.
Yeah, the clear delineation of bone, tissue, the nervous system. We just view the physical body as the absolute boundary of our existence. But the framework we are exploring today suggests that our standard biological blueprint is really just the foundation of a much more expansive, largely invisible architecture.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the teachings of a highly unique figure. He goes by Osman, also known as the blind Muslim yogi. And his background is, frankly, it's staggering.
Oh, absolutely staggering.
We are talking about someone who has been practicing advanced yoga and meditation for 50 years. He actually attained his first samadhi, which is a profound state of meditative consciousness at the age of 19.
19. I mean, think about what most people are doing at 19.
Seriously.
I,
And historically, his practice extended up to 18 hours a day. 18 hours. And even currently, he maintains a rigorous minimum of 8 to 10 hours daily. Just to, in his words, sharpen the sword.
That level of sustained, multi-decade discipline is so crucial to understand before we get into the weeds here, because Osman isn't dealing in like casual weekend wellness retreats or commercial fitness yoga.
No, not at all.
He is a master-level bioenergy healer,
Yeah.
and he specializes in critical care, terminal illnesses, and deep recovery. He actually operates utilizing principles of quantum entanglement, which grants him telepathic healing capabilities.
Which sounds like science fiction until you really look at the quantum physics of it, right?
Exactly. And he has studied extensively and widely across so many disciplines. From the Far East, the Middle East, the West. He's incorporated schools of thought, including Santorin available. He's really built this comprehensive universal approach.
And it's super vital to note up front his medical disclaimer here, because despite his incredibly high success rates over the last 50 years, he is adamant that his services are offered on a complimentary basis.
Yeah, they are designed to enhance what might be lacking in conventional medicine, but they are not a replacement for medical treatments.
Right. He always says that anyone with a medical condition should explicitly consult licensed professionals.
And because of his extensive long-term study and that rigorous 10 to 18 hours a day of practice, he has this uncommon ability to heal on very serious levels.
Which is why his treatments and consultation fees are not inexpensive.
Right, they're premium level services at a premium price. But that grounded, practical approach is exactly why we are analyzing his work today.
And our mission in this deep dive is to decode his highly detailed explanation of the, quote, transition from energy to consciousness.
Yeah.
Now, a quick note for you, listener, regarding his communication style. You will hear us discuss some intensely visual metaphors that Osman uses, and you need to know that Osman has been permanently blind, but only since May of 2023.
Right, so fairly recently.
Yeah. So when he vividly describes the visual mechanics of energy or the chakras, he is drawing on the eyesight he possessed as a normal person for the vast majority of his life, before May 2023. He's mapping this unseen energetic world onto the visual world he vividly remembers.
That visual clarity he provides is essential, especially when he maps out what he calls the baseline of human existence. Because to understand this transition to consciousness, we have to quantify the human energetic inventory.
Okay, let's break that down.
Right. So according to the ancient yogic sciences that Osman teaches, a human being possesses a total of 114 relevant energy systems, or major energy centers.
Let's look at the geography of that, because it's wild. He states that 112 of these centers are located within the actual region of the physical body.
But then there are two more.
Yeah. 2 more situated slightly above the crown area, like they literally hover outside the physical boundary of the head, which immediately shatters our standard anatomical maps.
It really does. And he also mentions there are at least 99 more beyond that, extending into regions that just transcend human description. But, we are focusing on the core 114 today.
Right, and here is the statistic that completely anchors this entire discussion. Out of those 114 energy centers, only 21 are active by default when you are born.
21.
Just 21.
That means 93 of your major energetic processors are entirely offline. They are dormant.
So what are those 21 centers actually doing? Osman explains they are active purely to support basic survival requirements. We are talking about organ function, muscle groups, breathing processes, heart rate regulation, and frontal cortex intelligence.
The basics.
But I actually have to push back here a little bit. Calling frontal cortex intelligence basic survival feels incredibly dismissive, doesn't it?
I can see why you'd say that, yeah.
Because we use our frontal cortex to sequence the human genome, we build artificial intelligence, we send rovers to Mars. Looking at the sheer scale of human technological achievement, how can Osman categorize our default state as extremely primitive?
Well, it sounds dismissive until you look at the underlying biological imperative driving that intelligence. I mean, think back to the Huberman Lab podcast.
Oh, the episode with Dr. Robert Sapolsky.
Exactly. When Professor Andrew Huberman was discussing the biology of stress with Sapolsky, Sapolsky expertly breaks down how the human brain evolved primarily as a predictive engine to avoid death.
Right, it's just a risk calculator.
Yeah. The prefrontal cortex is a magnificent tool, but its core function is still completely tethered to survival. It's calculating risks, securing resources, managing social hierarchies to ensure your physical safety. Osman isn't insulting human innovation. He's pointing out that our spaceships and our supercomputers are simply highly complex tools created by a survival-oriented brain.
Okay, so we are just like hyper-efficient survivors.
Precisely. And you can also see this reflected in the Mel Robbins podcast. When she brought on Dr. Amy Cuddy to discuss the mind-body feedback loop, they explored how much of our daily posture, our breathing, and our mental state is unconsciously locked in a defensive survival posture.
We are literally biologically bracing for impact all day long.
Yes, we are. And Osman captures this brilliantly with a smartphone analogy. Imagine your phone drops below a critical battery threshold, say under a fraction of a percent. What happens?
It immediately enters power saver mode.
Exactly.
The screen dims, the background apps close, and it stops searching for Wi-Fi. It ruthlessly kills every advanced feature just to keep the screen on so you can make an emergency call.
The intricate, high-level background functions are entirely shut off. And Osman argues that humanity is currently operating in that exact power saver mode. Those 21 active energy centers are just the bare minimum voltage required to keep the biological machine breathing and reproducing.
So the frontal cortex is just like the basic calculator app on that dying phone.
Yeah. Yes, it can do complex math, but you are entirely cut off from the internet, the high-definition camera, the GPS. You are running the basic apps of survival and logical thought, and you're entirely disconnected from your higher inherent potential.
Man, that reframes everything. You know, Arthur Brooks talked about this on Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom podcast. He discussed how we spend the first half of our lives obsessed with the fluid intelligence of survival.
Right, building wealth, securing status.
Yeah, exactly. Only to realize later that there is a massive void because we haven't accessed the deeper, crystallized meaning of existence. Osman is basically giving us the literal energetic anatomy of that void. We are walking around with 93 deactivated centers.
It's a huge deficit.
So how do we plug into the charger? How do we access the remaining centers within our immediate purview? This naturally bridges into how Osman defines the yoga system, which is obviously a far cry from a modern fitness class at your local gym.
Oh, a world apart. The commercialized view of yoga in the West often reduces it to physical stretching or light stress relief. But Osman is drawing on the rigorous traditions of figures like Swami Sivananda from the Divine Life Society and Yogananda.
Oh, Yogananda. His book, Autobiography of a Yogi, details these very same energetic mechanisms.
Exactly. Osman describes the yoga system as a highly specific engineered technology. It is a systematic set of exercises, habits, and precise breathing protocols designed over millennia for one single purpose: to awaken those dormant capacities.
It is the literal charging cable. And the visual he uses for this awakening process is just stunning. Remember, Osman has been blind since May 2023, but he remembers the world so vividly.
Right.
He compares the default human energy state to a dark Christmas tree at night. By default, there are just a few basic lights strung up, which represent the 21 active centers. You can see the dim outline of the branches. You know it's a tree, but it's mostly engulfed in darkness.
But when the science of yoga is applied with true discipline, those dormant capacities begin to receive voltage. The dead bulbs activate. The body, in his words, lights up like a Christmas tree, fully illuminating the previously invisible architecture.
And this brings us to the core terminology of his lecture, the transition from energy to consciousness. Notice the phrasing there.
Yeah, it's very specific.
He doesn't say transitioning to a higher consciousness, he says transitioning to consciousness, which implies a pretty startling conclusion. Osman does not believe we are currently conscious.
Right.
He states that our default existence is a literal dream state.
And, the concept of the waking world as an illusion or a dream state is a cornerstone of Eastern philosophy. Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna spoke extensively about this. The idea that what we perceive as reality is a heavily filtered, distorted projection.
But modern science is actually beginning to echo this too.
Absolutely. Think about The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. He interviewed Mo Gowda, and they touched heavily on how the brain literally hallucinates our reality based on extremely limited sensory inputs.
Right, because we only perceive a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Exactly. We're essentially living inside a closed-loop simulation generated by our survival centers.
When you are in a dream, you accept the bizarre logic of the dream as absolute reality. You feel genuine terror, joy, ambition within the dream. It isn't until your brain chemistry shifts and you wake up in your bed that you realize how limited your perspective was.
And Osman is applying that exact mechanism to us right now.
The life where you are paying a mortgage, arguing about politics, and building those spaceships, that is the dream. True wakefulness only occurs when the entire tree is lit.
We see discussions of this transition in other deep explorations of consciousness, too. On the Joe Rogan Experience, Sir Roger Penrose discussed the OR theory.
Oh yeah, the quantum consciousness theory.
Right, suggesting that consciousness isn't just a byproduct of computation in the brain, but is connected to quantum-level events occurring within the microtubules of our cells. So if consciousness has a quantum mechanical foundation, then activating 93 dormant energy centers isn't just a psychological shift.
No, it's fundamentally altering the quantum coherence of the human organism.
Exactly.
But I want to inject some practical skepticism here. Because if I'm listening to this and I decide, okay, I want to wake up from the dream state, how do I trust my own perception?
That's the trap, isn't it?
Yeah. If my frontal cortex is just a basic calculator app stuck in a dream, how do I know if the yoga I'm practicing is actually working or if I'm just dreaming that I'm becoming enlightened?
That is the most critical question in any esoteric pursuit. How do you measure progress when the goal is invisible to your current state of awareness? And Osman provides a highly specific metric for this, which he terms the inner conjunction.
Let's pull apart the mechanics of this inner conjunction. What is it?
Osman explains that the path to awakening is not a blind marathon where you endure decades of silence, just hoping to suddenly pop into enlightenment at the finish line.
That would be impossible to stick with.
Right. He says that as a practitioner applies the correct method with rigid discipline, they will experience intermittent flashes or messages of true consciousness.
You know, it reminds me of the Huberman Lab episodes discussing dopamine and motivation. Professor Huberman constantly emphasizes that the human brain requires dopamine milestones, intermittent rewards, to sustain long-term effort.
The biology demands it.
Yeah, from a neurobiological standpoint, a human being cannot sustain an 18-hour-a-day meditation practice for decades without some form of profound biological feedback.
And the inner conjunction provides that exact feedback. It acts as an experiential breadcrumb. For a few brief seconds, the static clears, and the practitioner experiences the unadulterated reality of the fully lit tree.
Wow.
These moments of profound clarity provide the irrefutable proof of concept required to sustain that grueling discipline.
We see this mirrored in the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes. When he speaks with high-performance figures like Robin Sharma, the central theme is always that monumental, multi-decade discipline requires an internal anchor.
Yes, a localized experience of the ultimate goal that keeps you moving forward when the external world demands you revert back to survival mode.
Exactly. So having established that the waking process is real and verifiable through these conjunctions, we need to locate the hardware. Where is this massive dormant power actually resting before the journey begins?
And this is where Osman moves from the macro philosophy directly into the microgeography of the body. He locates this energy in a resting state at the very base of the spine, specifically isolating it to the perineum area.
The physical sensation he attributes to these centers is fascinating. He notes that the solar plexus chakra, which is located in the stomach region, feels experientially massive, like he compares its size and rotation to a basketball.
But the root energy, sitting at the base, feels distinctly different.
Right. It feels like the sharp point of a needle. But here is where I struggle with the literalism of his teachings, because he claims that this tiny needlepoint area holds power comparable to 1 billion volts of electricity.
It sounds hyperbolic.
Right. If we treat this biologically, introducing 1 billion volts of standard electrical current into organic tissue would result in instant catastrophic vaporization. How are we supposed to interpret this? Is he just using billion volts as a dramatic metaphor for feeling, really energetic?
The skepticism is totally necessary, but we have to define what voltage means in a biological and quantum context.
Yeah.
Because we aren't talking about alternating current from a wall outlet. We're talking about bioelectricity and quantum potential.
Okay, fair point.
If we look at the work of researchers discussed frequently on the Huberman Lab, or the deep dives into cellular communication on the Ranveer show with guests like Dr. Siddharth Bhargava.
Oh, right. Talking about cellular biology.
Yeah, we know that every single cell in the human body operates on an electrical gradient. The human nervous system is an incredibly dense, complex electrical grid.
Right, our ion channels are constantly moving electrical charges back and forth.
Exactly. Now scale that up using Osman's specific expertise, which is quantum entanglement and bioenergy fields. In quantum physics, the energy potential locked within the smallest atomic structures is incomprehensibly massive.
Like atomic energy, the density of the energy is directly proportional to its explosive potential.
Yes. So when Osman says 1 billion volts, he is describing the experiential magnitude of the latent quantum biofield that's compressed into the root center.
That makes sense.
We can also look to Dr. Joe Dispenza's appearances on The Diary of a CEO.
Oh, I love that episode.
Yeah, he discusses how intense meditation creates highly coherent electromagnetic fields around the body, literally measurable by modern equipment. The energy is real, it just operates on a frequency different from standard thermal electricity.
So this dormant energy, which is often referred to in the ancient texts as kundalini, is like a heavily compressed spring. And I want to ground this for you, the listener. Think about your average Tuesday, okay? You are sitting in traffic, you are stressed about an email, your frontal cortex is calculating your survival based on a 1% battery charge.
Just trying to get through the day.
Right. And all the while, you are physically housing a highly concentrated, dormant bioelectric reactor at the very base of your spine.
Which brings up the obvious question. If this reactor is the key to escaping the dream state, why the secrecy?
Yeah.
Why the decades of grueling practice? Why can't we just initiate the awakening immediately and flood the system with this energy?
And Osman delivers a terrifying biological warning in response to that. He states flatly that if this energy were to awaken in its complete immense level all at once, it would literally pop your body.
Pop your body.
Yeah. The cellular structure would be entirely incapable of surviving the energetic overload.
The phrase pop your body sounds colloquial, but clinically, the dangers of premature awakening are incredibly well documented in esoteric literature.
Really? Like where?
Well, look at the Buddha the Gas Pump podcast. Rick Archer frequently interviews guests about the physiological toll of unguided spiritual awakenings. For instance, Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, who is a psychotherapist that specializes in Kundalini awakenings.
Oh, I've heard of her.
She has documented hundreds of clinical cases where spontaneous energetic movement resulted in severe nervous system trauma. It mimics psychosis, chronic pain, and sometimes leads to complete physical collapse.
Wow.
Furthermore, Gopi Krishna's famous autobiographical accounts detail years of agonizing physical and mental torment after he inadvertently forced this energy upward without proper preparation.
It's basically an electrical engineering problem. If you take a high-voltage power line from a nuclear plant and plug it directly into a standard 120-volt kitchen appliance, the appliance violently combusts. The wiring just cannot handle the load.
Exactly.
To use the power safely, it must pass through a series of transformers, substations that incrementally step the voltage down, or, in the case of the human body, techniques that step the biological capacity up.
Right. The human nervous system must act as its own biological transformer, and this is the critical insight. Spiritual awakening is not merely a cognitive realization or a shift in philosophical perspective. Like, you don't just read a book by Deepak Chopra or Tony Robbins and suddenly you're enlightened.
Right, it's not just a mindset shift.
No, it is a grueling, physical, biological mutation of the cellular structure. You are literally expanding the bandwidth of your nervous system to conduct a higher voltage of life force.
Which perfectly explains Osman's timeline. He states that safely navigating this process takes an average of 10 years, requiring dedicated practice of around 2 hours a day using specific kriyas.
10 years of daily, intense work.
Yeah. And I want to dig into the mechanism of a Kriya. Because how does sitting on a mat and doing a physical technique prevent your cells from popping?
To understand the mechanism, we could look at the crossover between ancient yoga and modern physiological hacks discussed on The Joe Rogan Show, particularly with guests like Wim Hof.
Oh, the breathing techniques.
Yes, when you perform specific yogic breathing protocols, like kumpaka, which is breath retention, you are intentionally altering the oxygen and carbon dioxide ratios in your bloodstream.
You are inducing a highly controlled state of stress.
Or hermetic stress response, yeah. By systematically applying this stress for 2 hours a day over a decade, you're forcing the autonomic nervous system to adapt. We know from neuroplasticity research, which is often discussed by Dr. Tara Swart on the Diary of a CEO, that chronic, focused demands on the nervous system force the brain to build denser neural pathways.
Right, and it increases the myelination around nerves.
Yes, which allows them to conduct electrical signals faster and with greater capacity. Furthermore, you are forcing the mitochondria in your cells to adapt to higher metabolic and electrical loads.
Yeah.
The Kriya is literally rebuilding the wiring of the toaster so it can handle the voltage of the power plant.
But 10 years, 2 hours a day. Think about the modern landscape we live in. We get frustrated if a web page takes 4 seconds to load.
Oh, absolutely.
We want Amazon Prime, next day delivery for our enlightenment. We seek out 5-minute wellness hacks. And Osman is telling us that true consciousness requires a decade of cellular rewiring. I can hear people listening to this and immediately checking out, thinking, I just don't have the time for that.
It is a severe filter, undoubtedly. On the Renveer show, when Renveer interviews spiritual masters like Sri M about Kriya Yoga, the recurring theme is the absolute necessity of patience and secrecy.
The secrecy part is interesting.
Right. The ancient sciences were kept hidden precisely because the human ego wants the shortcut, and the shortcut is biologically dangerous. If you try to hack a billion-volt bioelectric system, you don't get enlightened faster. You fry your nervous system.
You hop the body.
Yeah. The decade of practice is non-negotiable because biology dictates the speed of adaptation. Dr. Nicole LaPera touched on this concept on the Mel Robbins podcast. True holistic healing and cellular reprogramming cannot be rushed because the body prioritizes safety over expansion. You have to prove to your body day after day that it is safe to hold more energy.
So let's trace the journey to its climax. A practitioner puts in the decade of work. They engage the Kriyas. They induce the neuroplasticity. They biologically transform their nervous system to handle the load.
They've built the infrastructure.
Right. They systematically raise this needle point energy from the perineum, safely activating the dormant centers along the spine. Where does this billion-volt energy ultimately go?
It travels upward and collects in the very top region of the head, the highest energy center. And Osman explains a fundamental architectural rule regarding this top center. It requires a massive voltage to kickstart. Lower levels of energy, no matter how balanced or active they are in the lower body, simply cannot turn it on.
It's the difference between a AA battery and a jet turbine ignition. You can have a perfectly healthy AA battery running your basic survival apps, but it will never generate the spark required to ignite the higher brain.
And this is the moment the entire system is designed for. When the fully accumulated, safely transformed energy from the base reaches the crown, it provides the requisite voltage. The final center ignites.
The ignition sequence.
Yes, this ignition sequence is the ultimate transition from energy to consciousness.
It's the moment the final bulb on the Christmas tree is screwed in and the entire structure just floods with light.
To understand the profound shift this creates, we can look at the emerging field of neurotheology.
Neurotheology.
Yeah. On the School of Greatness podcast, Lewis Howes interviewed Dr. Andrew Newberg, who literally scans the brains of advanced meditators and prayer practitioners.
Oh, fascinating.
When individuals reach these peak states, the activity in their parietal lobes, which is the area of the brain responsible for creating a sense of physical boundaries and the self, dramatically decreases. Meanwhile, the frontal lobes become hyper-illuminated in entirely new ways.
So the feeling of being a localized, isolated self just vanishes.
Exactly. The feeling of being a survival-driven ego drops away, and a feeling of infinite conscious connection takes over.
And we hear echoes of this in Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom podcast when Dr. Lisa Miller discusses the neuroscience of spirituality. An awakened brain literally operates on a different wavelength, exhibiting broad spectrum alpha and theta coherence. The organism is no longer trapped in the localized dream of survival.
So if we synthesize everything Osman has presented today,
Right, let's put it all together.
those 21 primitive centers exist purely to keep the biological organism breathing and functioning long enough to undergo the rigorous, decade-long process of awakening the other 93.
The dream state is just a protective cocoon.
Yes. The basic apps keep the phone running so you can slowly, painstakingly recharge the battery. And only when that high-voltage payload reaches the crown do we actually, finally, open our eyes.
It is a breathtaking paradigm. The implication is that what we consider the absolute pinnacle of human existence is barely the starting line. Now, for anyone listening who wants to explore these methodologies practically,
Because there's a lot to take in.
yeah, Osman is adamant about providing accessible entry points, aiming for a scientific, results-based, and simplified methodology from these ancient sciences. You can visit his website at yogawellness786.com.
And we definitely want to remind you that he offers a highly effective, totally free 5-minute yoga and meditation program available for download right there on the site.
Which is the perfect place to start safely conditioning the nervous system.
It's important to note, too, that his YouTube channel contains an immense amount of free, detailed instruction. He doesn't withhold the functional mechanics of the practice there.
Right. You don't need to engage the paid services to get the core information. But for those seeking highly specialized interventions like his one-on-one consultations, group sessions, or his premium energy healing services for critical care, he operates a Patreon channel accessible through the website.
Right. Those are premium level because of the time and the 50 years of expertise involved. But the core scientific approach to beginning this energetic transition is freely available to anyone willing to apply the discipline.
So I want to leave you with one final thought to process as you go back into your daily routine. Back into the survival loops, the emails, and the traffic. We've established that in our current power saver mode, using only a fraction of a percent of our true capacity, humans have managed to compose symphonies. We experience profound love, we build massive global civilizations, and we literally map the stars.
And we've done all of that in the dark.
Exactly, in a literal dream state.
So if that is the extent of our creation while asleep, relying on the bare minimum biological voltage, what entirely new realities, what unimaginable dimensions of existence and profound states of peace become visible when the rest of the tree finally lights up?
What is the human mind actually capable of when running on 1 billion volts?
It's an incredible question to sit with.
The next time you feel like you've reached your absolute limit, just remember the architecture sitting dormant at the base of your spine. We rely so heavily on our anatomical textbooks, pointing to the visible boundaries and assuming that's all there is. But what if the real human architecture isn't made of bone and tissue at all, but of an ocean of dormant light, just waiting for the disciplined spark to ignite it? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.